Hi, I'm Dr. Moore, and at the suggestion of one of my colleagues at Radiopedia, I've put together some code notebooks as well as this YouTube video to teach people in the imaging profession about computers and code. In order to run my code notebooks, you actually don't need anything but a web browser. Most code notebooks would need something like Jupyter installed on your machine, or Google Colaboratory is possible to use. There's some other tools out there. Through the magic of programming, I have created something that you can run in a web browser and learn from. So, um, without further ado, I will jump in and say one more thing before I jump in. Uh, this video is sponsored by no one, so I'm going to give you my honest opinion about everything. Um, you know, I thought about having this video sponsored, but then I would have to pretend I liked certain products eventually. Um, there are a lot of software products I don't like, and some that I do. And it has nothing to do with the company. Some products are just written better than others. For example, I actually like one Microsoft product. I think there's one. I think I can only think of one I like. It's called VS Code. The rest of Microsoft stuff, especially that Windows operating system, I'm not so thrilled with. But I do like VS Code. And I'm going to say what I think about everything freely. You don't need any particular machine to do what I'm going to show you how to do. Although, in all honesty, you probably be better off on a Linux machine if you want to do some real programming. Um, so without further ado, now for real, let's jump in. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is probably pause the video and follow the instructions here, which will also appear in the video description. You should be able to link from the video description and go to this URL. Then you'll need to log in. Your login name is Makeda, M-A-K-E-D-A. The password is besame mucho, just as it appears here with the space. Besame space mucho. This will load your portal. Then you can click and end up on the files I would direct you to, or you can just use the direct URL once you're signed in. From this URL, you should be able to get to a place that looks like this. Here I have notebook 0 already loaded up. I'll load up notebook -1. I would highly suggest you start on -1. It might get you excited and show you some things that you can actually do. It's a code notebook I made about augmented data. Augmented data is one of the steps when you're building an artificial neural network. It's not absolutely necessary, but I highly recommend it. So load that up, and then you'll just be able to click on the notebooks and start running them. So as I said, follow the instructions. You could just pause the video, do the notebooks, and come back, or you can go back and forth, toggle around. But this is really the way you should start learning, not just by watching a video, but by actually going into the notebooks and trying them. Now, you'll notice I have a notebook -1. Where you start counting is arbitrary, and it's actually really important to remember that because different coding languages start counting at different places. Some start counting at 0, and some start counting at 1. And you can actually make some pretty tragic errors if you don't take that into account. More on that later. So here we are in code notebook -1. Now you see this notebook has cells. I'm on the first cell, now I'm on the second, going back to the first. These cells are going to be either markdown or code or some other stuff we don't care about. Basically, markdown isn't going to run as code. But we will press run and move to the next cell, and press run and move to the next cell. Now this cell here is a code cell, but it doesn't have any code in it. I put this pound sign here, and that makes the line a comment. Lines that are comment are not interpreted as code. If you're first learning to program, I suggest that the very, very first thing you do is learn how to make a comment in whatever language you're learning. This code notebook is in Python, and this is really meant for you to pause the video, actually read what's in my markdown, and run. You're going to have to do some active learning to learn how to code. It's absolutely not like medicine in that you can just sort of memorize your way through medicine. To code, you actually have to go and code. So hit run and go through the cells. Now let me point out something. Here, you know, I comment on when the program was made. I comment on what I'm about to do. You'll also notice here, and I think it's line 7, from skimmage data import immunohistochemistry, that's also commented out. Now, I left that in because it's an example of something I do a lot when I'm coding, which is like, you know, I might put in a line of code. Please excuse my son in the background. I might put in a line of code and then later decide I don't want it, but I'll just comment it out. In ways, what I'm doing is kind of similar to like keeping a bookshelf of stuff around when I do that. There's stuff I can just grab and get later. Of course, if it were a finished product, I'd just get rid of that stuff because you want to have clean code in the end. But when I comment stuff out, that's what I'm up to. Let's move on to code notebook 0. Okay, now here is where this this video is going to become kind of like a choose your own adventure video. I don't know if others of you remember the choose your own adventure series notebook, but I have another notebook. It's called Notebook 0. Those of you who saw my first notebook and were either wincing in pain or tapping away angry comments into the YouTube, I can't wait to read those, about how inefficient it was, or maybe I didn't use the line of code you liked or the library you liked. All right, your adventure on this next notebook is going to be code golf. If you don't know what code golf is, maybe you're not as expert as you thought you were, but I would like you to spend the next, I don't know, however long this takes me, 10 seconds writing code golf for my first and the next, this notebook, which is notebook 0. Everybody else, you can just run along the cells and read here. Started you out with the classic Hello World program and moved on to sort of try and explain some really super important things, not just for the language Python, but for many, many languages, okay? I think I will say something about languages right after this, but some of you play some code golf and give me something and we'll see what it looks like. I will tell someone else to also play code golf with some of this and give you an example of what that might look like, okay? Everybody roll through the notebook 0, the experts playing code golf, the beginners learning from the notebook, and have fun. Okay, the person who thought they were an expert did your code, although not in Visual Studio Code, probably in Emacs. Look, something like this line here. Did it? Okay, you. Yes, you who writes a line of code like that. I have a message for you you're not going to like. It's wrong. Code, you're blinding my eyes. Ow! Like, what does that even mean? It's wrong. Even when you're right, you are wrong. Okay, just wrong. you're going to come back to that and you yourself won't realize what it meant. Like, do you plan to code for anyone besides these uber hipster if you were like an infrastructure programmer who's writing in like Rust and this is writing in like Rust and this is like memory to optimize the usage of memory, I'll let you slide. Learn to code in a way that makes sense, learn to code in a way that makes sense, please. Okay, so that part there had a little editing for brevity and perhaps removing some words that weren't so ladylike, but I think you get the point. If you want some more thoughts about how the world of programming became a total cluster duck of douchebaggery, you go to my blog on my Wix site and look for the page I'm showing you right now, which is Decrypting the Youth Speak, my blog entry from November 20th. Okay, we are really close to done, and just showing part of a code notebook I'll go into next time. But I just want to make one more note about languages. This notebook here and everything I've shown today has been in Python. So let's just take a moment and talk about languages. Okay, so languages, computer programming languages, there are so many. Most people these days who do serious algorithms, maybe not most, but many are using something like Python, R, Julia. I guess when I say serious algorithms, I'm talking about serious algorithms in image processing or statistics. Once the algorithms are written, if you want them to actually run and execute quickly using your machine's memory efficiently so that they can process all that data in an image, you're going to have to rewrite them or have someone else rewrite them in something like C. Now, there are some languages out there that are probably, if not faster, at least contenders compared to C, although I'm partial to C. My husband calls me a C supremacist. There's also Rust, Mercury, and Ada, a language developed by the American Department of Defense, I think. But C is supreme, not just because I said so, but basically because everyone uses it. So it's easier to find stuff about it. The same reason that Python is so common. The more common Python is, the more common Python is. Python actually has some problems as a language, but more and more people keep using it, which means more and more libraries are developed in it and people know how to communicate with each other about their code in it, and they've developed all kinds of things like the code notebooks I developed in Python. Like, the whole world's going Python, whether or not it's the greatest language. So my advice to you would be that if you want to do serious statistical programming, you look at either Julia or R. I'm partial to R, but you can also use Python. And if you want to get into some image processing for machine learning, well, Python is these days the way to go. You can do a lot. There are a lot of great libraries, Skimage, Scikit-learn, NumPy. You'll see these libraries in my code. And if I make another series on machine learning, you'll see libraries that are related to that. Hello, Keras. That's it. So those are languages. Okay, so at this point you may be wondering, why is this crazy old woman doing like a YouTube channel? I mean, she's not like some 19-year-old who's beautiful selling makeup, right? Okay, so here's the deal. This world is a scary place, and I actually believe it could be improved a lot in many aspects, whether it's radiological diagnosis or understanding climate change. If more people knew how to code, if they knew how to use their machines correctly. Tune in next time. We will dive deep into coding, some more things like what you see in front of you here. That's some image processing related code. We'll talk about how it is and isn't similar to GIS code, Geographic Information System code. We'll talk about version control. We'll talk about everything in my series on how to code, and why I'm calling it code and not programming. So to find out, tune back in to the next sessions.